Chapter 5. Building a Modern Company. By 1887, Henry Heinz had taken the small business he started with his family 11 years earlier and turned it into a food-producing giant. Things did not always run smoothly, though. Between Henry and his younger brother, John was not as dedicated to the business as Henry was. In August 1888, the family held a meeting, and John decided to sell his part of the company. Henry's cousin Frederick, who was also a part owner, had already sold some of his share back to Henry. Now Sally and Henry owned a little more than half of the company, which was renamed the H.J. Heinz Company. With a new name for his company, Henry also wanted a new factory. He hoped to adapt some of the business methods he had observed in Germany. There, he had seen the Stolwerk chocolate factory use a steam-powered machines to do some of the work that used to be done by hand. The machines completed the work much faster. Henry also saw how the Stolwerk company helped its workers. The factory had a lunchroom and a store for its employees, and the company established schools for their children. Outside of work hours, the company held picnics and dinners and gave its employees their own small plots of land to farm. The company even helped find doctors for workers who got sick. Henry had always treated his workers fairly, but this German system was unlike anything he had seen in the United States. And Henry realized its value. Happy, well-cared-for employees would stay on the job and work hard. They would not be interested in causing trouble for their bosses. Henry had seen firsthand the violence that could occur when workers and company owners fought. In 1877, some U.S. railroad companies had cut workers' wages. Angry workers then walked off their jobs. They went on strike. In Pittsburgh, the striking workers and their supporters clashed with the National Guard troops, leaving more than 20 people dead. Henry hated the violence and did not want his workers to feel that he did not care for them. In 1889, he bought land in Allegheny City, just outside of Pittsburgh. The site offered easy access to the Allegheny River and to railroad lines. He quickly began building the first of several buildings that would become part of a huge factory complex. Henry had a railway built right into the plant so trains could easily bring in produce and take out packaged food. The work on the new factory continued for nearly 10 years. Eventually, the factory site included a restaurant, an indoor pool, and an emergency room for medical issues, and an auditorium where workers went to hear concerts and lectures. Henry hired more workers and more women. They bottled pickles, trimmed meat, and peeled fruit. Male and female employees had separate dressing rooms with bathrooms. At a time when many people did not have indoor toilets in their own homes, the women also received freshly washed uniforms each day. The company offered classes in English and other subjects for anyone who did not speak English or who had not completed their education. Henry treated his growing number of horses well, too. More than 100 horses lived in the 3-story stable. The company kept its wagons on the first floor, while the horses lived on the second, and supplies were stored on the third. Henry's stable was so modern, it used electric machines to feed, water, and brush the horses. They even had their own hospital and warm baths where they could soak their tired feet. Henry also installed the most modern machinery in his factory. Moving belts carried the food and bottles along each step of the process. This was an early form of what was later called mass production. As his business expanded and improved, Henry decided to buy a huge new house in the Point Breeze neighborhood of Pittsburgh. The most successful business owners in the city lived there. The new Heinz home was called Green Lawn. Mass production. American manufacturers of the 19th century constantly looked for ways to make their products faster and cheaper. In 1913, Henry Ford perfected mass production with his Model T car. Parts moved through the factory, and workers performed the same task over and over, working on what was called the production line. The year before his employees began assembling cars on the production line, Ford made about 69,000 cars. But only 1 year later, in 1914, the company produced more than 202,000 Model T Fords. Millionaires' Row. The city of Pittsburgh had continued to see its industries grow since the 1870s, and the wealthy men who founded factories and banks lived near each other in a neighborhood called Millionaires' Row. They included electrical industry pioneer George Westinghouse, Andrew Carnegie, head of the largest steel company in the world, and his friend Henry Clay Frick. Their homes in Millionaires' Row were large and elegant estates. The neighborhood even had its own private station on the railroad line. Henry, Sally, and their 4 children had plenty of space in Green Lawn's 30 rooms spread out over 4 floors. Henry installed colorful stained glass in several rooms and turned the upper floor into his own personal museum. He displayed the art and objects he collected on his business trips. Outside, the Heinz's children rode their own ponies, while Henry spent time in the 10 greenhouses on the grounds. Just as when he was a boy, he continued to work with the soil, planting fruit trees and vegetables, as well as rare flowers. In April 1892, Henry said, "We are all much delighted with our new home." Henry had much to be proud of. In 1892, he opened his first major factory outside Pittsburgh, a sauerkraut factory in Muscatine, Iowa. The company had branch offices and warehouses in a number of cities across the United States. It even had small salting stations to begin the pickling of cucumbers as they were picked in the fields. In 1893, Henry made a splash at the Columbian Exposition, a huge fair held in Chicago to celebrate the 400th anniversary of Christopher Columbus's arrival in the New World. The World's Columbian Exposition of 1893. Over the course of 6 months, more than 25 million people attended the Columbian Exposition in Chicago, Illinois. George Westinghouse provided the electricity to power more than 200,000 light bulbs that illuminated the fair. The exhibit featured the world's first Ferris wheel, a 250-foot tall machine that could carry more than 2,000 people at a time. And thousands of companies introduced their new products to the visitors, such as Aunt Jemima's pancake mix and Juicy Fruit chewing gum. For the exposition, Henry had designed a pin in the shape of a pickle with the company name on it. At the fair, people flocked to the Heinz exhibit on the second floor to get a free pickle pin. So many people wanted the pins that the second floor of the building began to sag. Other business owners quickly saw the value of handing out small items to promote their company name. Once again, Henry's good idea had proven to be a winner, and his company gave away pickle pens for more than 100 years.